evening, everyone. Welcome to the Select Board meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. If I could ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
No.
No, I don't know. Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Any announcements tonight? Okay. All right, next up is public input. Public input will be limited to 3 minutes and should be about agenda items only. If there's anything that is not on the agenda that somebody would like to discuss, please notify the town manager, assistant town manager, and then we will put it on the agenda for next time. So is there anybody here for public input? I think a hand got raised.
Oh, that's this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, stop there. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we've got to wait another minute or so before we can start the public hearing, because the public hearing has to be at 6:05. So, Susan, could we have the town clerk come up?
Sure.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Hello, and good evening. I sent along a memo. I just wanted to discuss the November 2022 in-person early voting hours for the town of Ayer.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, we are offering this opportunity to our voters for the general election. That is November 8th. And the requirements for the Votes Act, excuse me, there's 2 weeks of early voting. So it starts on Saturday, October 22nd, and runs the first week thereafter. And then we have them on Saturday, October 29th. And then the second week is the following week after that until Friday, November 4th. The requirements are that I need to have at least one weekend day and a total of 6 hours on the weekend. So in previous years when we've offered the in-person early voting, Saturday is the busier day. So I was going to be offering it on Saturdays from 9 to 3. For the weekday hours, I need to offer at least 50% of regular business hours for the first week, and the second week would be regular business hours unless a vote of the board would be willing to make accommodations to that. Looking at the the 2020, which was a presidential election that was also during the pandemic, so it was a different time. But since thankfully things are returning to normal, I feel in-person voting is valuable, but I don't feel that the town utilizes it in a full-time, full business hour capacity. Even in August when we offered it for the primary, we also have mail-in voting, so it's another opportunity for folks to vote. We mailed out over 800 ballots, of which just over 400 were returned to us for the mail-in voting. And I had about 93 people that received ballots in the mail, but then opted to come in to vote in person, whether it was during the in-person voting or on election day. So the town of Ayer likes to vote in person. I mean, again, mail-in voting and so forth is great, but we're a town that like to come in, and we like to come in on election day, which is great. But having this set up, especially for 2 weeks, where it's asking for myself and the assistant town clerk to be in 2 places at once, and also offering all the other services we provide to the town. So it's just, it was very slow. So to compare, in 2020, again, was a presidential, we had a total of 272 voters in 6 days. In 2022, in 2020, did I say 2022? 2020, we had 272 voters. In 2022, we had 73. the Friday, the last day of the voting was like the heavier day. I think we had 31 people, but there were 2 days where we had 2 people, and they were the people working the polls. So it kind of lets us know it's just a different trend here for the town. So what I'm proposing and asking for you to consider is that, again, starting on Saturday, October 22nd, we will be here from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The first week would be Monday, October 24th to Friday, October 28th. We would offer the in-person voting in the Great Hall from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Again, my numbers from previous years is that the business is in the morning, the traffic is in the morning, the afternoons, the numbers are really there. So then again, we would Saturday, October 29th, we would be here from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then for that second week, which would be Monday, October 31st to Friday, November 4th, I would want to offer an afternoon. So it would be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday would be our evening opportunity from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then Friday would be 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. because it's the last in-person day, and that's when I would see a heavier volume of voters. So if you are so willing to consider this, I would need a vote from the board today because I would need the vote within 20 days of the first day of early voting, and this is your meeting that's well within that 20 days. The next meeting's outside of that window, so that's why I'm here today. And I welcome any discussion or questions or.
I think that it sounds like a good plan.
Straightforward, no questions?
Okay.
You did say Monday to Friday, October 24th, it's 9 a.m. you want it to start, not 8 a.m., right?
I think I originally had put 9. I decided 8 because I need to have 50%.
Yep.
So
okay.
I do need to have it from 8 to 12.
Yeah, I just didn't want to read it incorrectly.
Yeah. Oh, did I? And I
Yeah.
think I meant to go back. Sorry if I didn't change that. Yes, it should say 8 a.m.
Okay.
Because that would fulfill the 50% business hours requirement. So.
I'll make a motion for the Ayer Select Board to approve in-person early voting hours for the town of Ayer as presented by the town clerk as follows. Saturday, October 22nd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday, October 24th through Friday, October 28th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Saturday, October 29th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday, October 31st, Wednesday, November 2nd, Thursday, November 3rd from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. and Tuesday, November 1st from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Friday, November 4th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say I have been receiving interest on election worker recruitment. So I just wanted to reach out in an effort to recruit members of the community to become more engaged and involved with the democratic process for our town, the Commonwealth, and our country. I'm reaching out to share my search for confident individuals to fill this role. I feel the key to a successful election is to have members of my election team to be inclusive and represent all ethnic, gender, religious, socio-economical, physical, and political backgrounds. So I just wanted to, again, reach out to anyone who is interested in working. The requirements, again, due to the Votes Act, is to be an election worker is you need to be 18 years of age and a citizen of the United States. So not necessarily only a resident of our town. So just a quick little plug on that. And that's all election talk. And then my next item.
Okay. Yep. All right. I'm requesting a one-day liquor license for St. Mary's Church on the October 15th.
Yes. So now here's a resident. The St. Mary's Church, we are going to be holding a Polish dinner to raise money for our parish. It's going to be on Saturday, October 15th at 5 p.m. in the parish hall at St. Mary's Church on 31 Shirley Street. And we are requesting a one-day liquor license so that we can offer beer and wine, along with a lovely menu that I included in my letter.
Looks good.
Come on by.
I might have to, I'm hungry reading it, so. Okay, any discussion?
No discussion.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for St. Mary's Church at 31 Shirley Street on Saturday, October 15th, as presented.
Second it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. All right, thank you
My
very
vote
much.
wasn't contingent on it, but we make me a plate, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me.
Okay,
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
all right, so now we can hold our public hearing. We can't start early, but we can start a little bit late, so, sorry.
Do I read it?
Yes.
Okay. Town of Ayer notice of public hearing, Ayer Select Board. The Ayer Select Board will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 at 6:05 p.m. to consider the transfer of an all alcoholic beverages package store license from The Vineyard Ltd., doing business as The Vineyard, 63 Park Street, Ayer, Mass., to Jalaram Bappa Inc. The meeting will be held in person and on Zoom. For Zoom call-in information, please contact atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100. Name of the applicant, The Vineyard Limited, doing business as The Vineyard, 63 Park Street, Ayer, Mass., transferring to Jalaram Bappa Inc., doing business as The Vineyard, 63 Park Street, Ayer, Mass. Date of public hearing, Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. Time of the public hearing at 6:05 p.m. Location of the public hearing, in person, Ayer Town Hall, 1 Main Street. Remote participation meeting held on Zoom. Zoom ID number 897-8090-0793. Meeting materials and information may be obtained by contacting Carly Antonellis, the Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100.
Will the interested parties please come forward?
Thank you.
Okay, do we have another chair? Okay, you got it? Okay.
Is that because I'm old?
No, not necessary.
Okay, so if you please introduce yourselves and tell us what's going on. I
My name is
recognize
Jeff
you.
Gendron, and I'm owner of the Vineyard.
My name is Peter Knox, and I'm representing the, that name I can never get out, but the Jalaram Bappa Inc. And I think both my clients, at least one is on Zoom. They both live a long distance away and they have young families. And so they requested the ability to come in on Zoom rather than be here. And plus they both have full-time jobs.
Oh, no problem. We don't have a problem with Zoom.
Doing very similar things that Jeff does.
Okay. So why the transfer?
I'm retiring. Yeah. I have 2 bad knees and I have to have them done.
Oh, that's a
So,
shame.
Yeah, so they're bone on bone, so I have to have replacements.
Okay. Well, hopefully,
So I'm at the end.
hopefully the getting the knees done and the retirement will go very well for you. And so, are you going to be? Are they going to still be calling it the Vineyard? Is
Yes,
there going to
they
be a
are.
name change? Okay.
Part of the transfer is that they get the name and any intellectual property that he has and his phone numbers. They're going to run just about the exact same business that's being run there right now. It's going to be hard to even notice that there's a change, except Jeff won't be there. I don't think he'll be there anyway.
And they're young.
They're both young and they both have experience in the business. One of them already has a liquor license for a very similar sized store in Drake-it, and the other operates a convenience store in Maynard. It's kind of cute, it's right on the corner of the street, and they sell beer and wine.
Okay.
And they're both really nice young men, and they have a very good reputation. And I don't think you all have the package. I assume you've all gone through it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have concerning my clients.
And also myself too. I'll
Okay.
answer any question.
Okay. Well, as this is a public hearing, does anybody in the public have any questions? Okay. Seems pretty straightforward. You guys have any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay, so according to the packet, you're not making any changes to the facility or anything like that? You're basically moving right in?
Yeah, hopefully we just move right
He's
in.
handing you the keys and you're walking in the door?
Once we get through the next, after this step,
Yeah.
the next step.
Okay. All right, well, I don't see any problems with this.
No, and we had relevant departments review, everything was okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
All right. Well, it doesn't seem like anybody has any questions.
Very
It seems
straightforward.
straightforward. All right. We wish you very well.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I'd
you've been there for a
I'd like
long
to thank
time.
the town of Ayer because my kid ended up going to school here,
Yeah?
and we're from Fitchburg,
Uh-huh.
and they had very good, experience here and there.
Oh,
So
good.
it's been a great ride.
Good. Good. Glad to hear it. All right. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for the transfer of Chapter 138, Section 15, all alcoholic beverage package store license from the Vineyard LTD to Dalaram Bapa Incorporated, 63 Park Street, as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Congratulations.
Thank
Okay,
you very
thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you for your time, Kevin.
All right.
Enjoy
Thank you,
retirement.
Colleen. Thank you,
Yes.
Robin.
Yeah, good luck with the knees.
Thank you.
He has
I'll
a
need
big
it.
honey-do list for us.
Good for you. And don't let him use the knees as an excuse,
No,
okay?
no, thank you.
All right, take care. All right. Want to close the,
I'll make a motion to close the
Thank you.
public
I'm like,
hearing.
what do I say? I haven't had to do one yet. I'll second that.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. The public hearing is closed. Oh,
Sorry.
all right. Mr. Rivera. Hi. So Mr. Rivera has made it. We had gotten an email that you might be a few minutes late, but it looks like you did quite well in getting here in time.
Yes, I was a little concerned that I would get here on time, but good directions. Thanks for having
All
me.
right, yes. If you could please introduce yourself for the public.
Yes, thanks. I am Dan Rivera. I'm the new CEO of Mass Development. I'm on the job a little over a year and 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
I come to the role after being mayor of the city of Lawrence. And, part of coming here and part of new leadership is learning what things need to be done and what best direction to drive the organization in. But I found that we have a very capable staff and who are working hard to build relationships with the communities. And as serious as we take the task before us at Devon's, it's important for you to know that it's equally important as for us to have this great relationship with you all. And we probably don't do it the best as we possibly can every time. And so some apologies on that front as we're moving to make change, but at the same time ensure we don't create more chaos than is necessary in that process. But we are very thrilled to have an ongoing relationship with the communities. Ayer has been, from what the staff tells me, something very important in making sure all the things that happen at Devon's as one of the communities that we look towards to help us make those things happen.
Well, we thank you for coming. Because as I stated, the relationship between Devon's and Ayer needed some tweaking, because, as you stated, you've been on the job for a little while, but we hadn't heard from you. And this has caused some distress. And as I stated, this caused some distress when we got an email, the Devon's Jurisdiction Framework Committee, saying that Mass Development was pulling out. And I know you feel like that the email explained it all, but it didn't. So let me just kind of give you kind of a background. as you know, Devon's, when it was taken over by the government, took portions of Harvard and Shirley and Ayer and even a small piece of Lancaster, though they kind of disowned it years ago, okay? Ayer had the biggest impact with Devon's out of the three towns, okay? The entrances are in Ayer. They were coming to Tiny's, coming to the little Korean restaurant that I can never remember its name. So when it closed, it affected this town. Don't get me wrong, it affected the other towns too, but it affected this town even bigger. Okay, so, it has been a part of Ayer. In fact, a lot of people think that Devon's has always been in Ayer. They're surprised when they hear that historically where the borderlines were, okay?
Mhm.
As you know, in 2033, as it states right now through Chapter 498 as it's called, states that, there should be a plan that goes in front of the state delegation to say, okay, here's the idea, here's what the three towns want to do. We have it all written out and everything, and then, the state delegation going, okay, so be it. But in order to get there, we do need Mass Development's help. And first of all, I want to thank you, Mass Development, for the resources that you were using to help us when you were meeting with us.
Mhm.
But when you pulled out and then everyone was kind of like, we're not getting responses to emails or anything, that was quite disturbing. So we're feeling, the feeling that's going on is that Mass Development doesn't care, that Mass Development just wants to run the clock out on, we'll say Vicksburg Square, for example.
Mhm.
I believe that's a historical building. And, as you know, there's an affordable housing crisis in this area. Actually, nationally, but we're going to concentrate on this area. And we have this building that really could do some good for affordable housing. And yet, every time we start to talk about it, it falls apart. And it kind of fell apart on Mass Development side this time. It didn't even get to Super Town meeting this time because it came up in conversation again. So there's a feeling that's going on is that Mass Development just wants to run the clock and let the buildings deteriorate to the point where they can't be fixed, and then tear it down and thus kind of lose the character.
Mhm.
My father was Army. He actually was on Devon's for a little while, and I went to the Navy and then ended up working for an Air Force. Army bases were always my favorite. There was something about when you drove onto an Army base as to how it looked that I always loved, okay? I drove on many a Navy base and I was just like, ugh. Air Force, nice job, but Army, the way they did their bases. And that place still has that character.
Mhm.
But you also have people that live there that are feeling a little disenfranchised.
Mhm.
And that's the problem with that whole Chapter 498 deal. That is nothing new personally,
Yeah.
just the representative.
Right.
Because they're not even they get to vote in this town, but that's about it. Okay? They're just voting for state elections or national elections. They're really not involved in a local one because it doesn't affect them,
Understood.
which is a shame, okay? Because it could affect them in the future.
Mhm.
So what we would like is for you to allow Mass Development, your staff, to rejoin the part of the conversation. If there's a problem that really was the straw that broke the camel's back as to why you pull it out, please tell us right now, because maybe we can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, again, I understand that the eventual jurisdiction use, if you want to call it that, or the end state is very important to the lives and prosperity of the communities that surround Devon's. And so I don't want to, for any moment, to think that we're taking a cavalier attitude about it, or that we don't appreciate the momentous nature of the conversations. I will say that part of what we have before us as an agency is to ensure that we do what's tasked to us by the bylaws, and that's to ensure that we're doing a good job of the redevelopment. And last, a couple months back when we pulled out, I was having a hard time seeing that we were accomplishing that. So we were making sure of that, to focus on the redevelopment, to focus on, we had a bridge issue that was almost falling down. And so we had to, there was almost an opportunity that military vehicles were going to go through one of the communities. And so we wanted to make sure we were focused on the right things. I wouldn't say there was one big thing that happened that made it like, a crisis situation. That's not what we were dealing with. But I'm a real focused person, and so I want to make sure that at the very least we're doing the things that are before us. We have to build a public safety center. We have to support all the developments going on there, and there was an opportunity to be more focused, and so that's why we were where we're at. I think this has brought up a good opportunity for the communities to have a very pointed conversations about what they want to see happen, and I think it's great that conversation continues. We are in a situation where, even though we have staff, unlike the communities, we don't have tons of staff. And so most of the staff is really in support of the community, in support of Devon's, and the firefighters, DPW, and the recreation teams. And so the amount of staff that we do have is not that big. And so ensuring that they're focused on all the things that are important across the agency, across the Commonwealth, and not give you all short shrift, or short shrift to any other part of the mission. And so we're going to, for the time being, we're going to continue this path of being supportive of the things that you all want to get done, and listening to the product of those conversations. Do you feel strongly that it's just a thing that has to be done 3 years before the time frame? And that's not a mechanism of trying to run out the clock on the situation. I think that the best snapshot that we're going to take is going to happen closer to the date. Even today, if you were to pull data, you're always pulling data that's a couple years back. And so we want to make sure we're showing the best possible scenario in all cases. Definitely want to make sure that whatever we propose, whatever we produce is something that gives it as much data as possible, as much timely data as possible. One of the top tiers items in the governor's economic development agenda is housing, and so I stand with you on that. I don't want to have the communities not know that we're not listening, and so we've heard twice from the communities about affordable housing, about housing, and I felt like we were rushing to do a super town meeting and we were not really prepared for it. And again, under my stead, I did not want to present to the communities a proposal that we didn't really feel great about, or that didn't really meet the things that the communities were talking about. So I don't think we were prepared to go to super town meeting. It wasn't because we didn't want to. I'd love to do housing and at Devon's if the communities can agree to it through the process. And I totally think the process is a good process, considering that you could be, whole groups of people can come and be living in your backyard that don't currently live there. A whole ecosystem is being built back there. And so I don't take it lightly that we have to go through a super town meeting process. And I think it's fair. But what I want to do is when we do those things, when we come to you with those items, that we're prepared and that it's based on stuff that we've listened to you from. And so I think I tried all the one things that you talked about. Housing is still important to us. We're still, looking forward to the conversation that leads us to the 3 years before. The clock is up, but we are definitely not trying to run the clock out. We would do it tomorrow if we could, but I think that I've seen the letters to the editors and I've seen the conversations we've had. We've had meetings with the legislators. Anxious to be part of an education effort around what it could be like. But I feel that our role, just like the DEC's role, is one of the super licensing board, the planning board, all those things. Because they have that role, our role really is to bring development and let you all figure out, with support from us, staff support, that will then inform the direction later in 33.
Scott?
So one thing I do want to point out is about 4 years ago, Mass Development came back to the towns and said that they would be willing to listen to disposition conversations before 2033. And that started this whole process where each community was going to the joint meetings, which Janice is our representative on. We were looking to get our town-specific committees going. Unfortunately, COVID hit about that time, so we haven't really ramped that up. The challenge when you're talking about housing and the current situation in Devon's, in my opinion, is it is super town meeting. And when you look at the proposals that have gone into Vicksburg Square, you have 3 towns that have to come together and wholeheartedly agree on everything. And I think that there's a lot of uneasiness on that within the public officials. Before I was here, I was on the finance committee, so I was part of the big Trinity proposal, reviewing that, looking into that. And there was a lot of anxiety that came up around that proposal because you don't know what the end result is going to be at Devon's. So the ability for the communities to take the time in the next few years and have discussions, do analysis, and even if that analysis is using data that's a few years old, there's part of a leap of faith that you have to take based upon that, where if the 3 communities can come together and agree on a disposition, I think that opens the door for the types of developments that we do need in this region, particularly around housing. Because housing seems to be a hot button issue in Devon's because there is a cap in place on the housing units based upon the original agreement. And in order to lift that and move beyond that, it kind of becomes a, well, where's it going to be and who's going to get that? You look at Vicksburg Square, 75% sits in Ayer, 25% sits in Harvard. You know, what does that even look like if that was to be built? Are you going to divide the community in 3/4 and a quarter? You know, is 1/4 of the kids going to go to Harvard schools? 3/4 going to come to Ayer, et cetera. So I think disposition needs to be expedited so that we can have a view of what the future is going to look like. From a community perspective, and also I'll add from our community, we're 9.2 square miles and we don't have a lot of open space left to be able to put in affordable housing. We don't have a lot of space for recreational area to add on to what we have. So there are opportunities that we do want to look at in the disposition question that go beyond just simple housing. It's a generational impact on our communities, all 3 communities, based upon what's decided there.
Yeah, and I think that's critically important conversations to have around planning and use that I think that the DEC and us together can support the communities in doing. The jurisdiction question is about the final state, and us talking more about how can we do the things that the communities want. I think that's a good use of all of our times, from a good use of the agency's time to help in that development. You guys come together and say, hey, we all want to support housing. This is how it's got to look like. We'll go out and get that stuff for you. Just the same way we are actively out there trying to fill those buildings and that land with the type of industrial use that you all want there. I just have a difference of opinion that you have to know the end state in order to get that information and make those decisions. I don't. The agency's role is to some extent, because we were driving to those kind of end questions, became more political than really we should be, and we really need to be just like the DEC, a broker, an honest broker that can say, hey, we're gonna. We have this much, because to me, a lot of these questions are binary. We have a cap. We have 14 spots left. That's all we have. We had 8.5 million square feet for industrial. Now, thanks to you guys and your support, really appreciate it. We're moving towards having 12 million. It's binary for us. We really feel like these conversations about the end use is really from the communities to have. and who the leaders of the legislature are in. So anxious to be part. Again, we're going through some staffing changes, and so that even before the more recent staffing changes was still an issue. We weren't. We're trying to stand up our land bank activities, our authority. We have been very active in commercial real estate across the Commonwealth, and I'm trying to bring that power that they use from skyscrapers and big commercial
We
transactions
don't
to.
want any skyscrapers.
I'm trying to bring that power to Main Street. If I can help a 2-story building, so we're trying to do that at the same time. So the real estate staff, who for all intents and purposes had Devon's and very few other projects like that, some in Northampton and Taunton, we're trying to refocus them on something different, and so that caused a little bit of a burden on staffing. I say all that to say that those conversations are important to us because they're important to you, and important for us in order to meet our mission with the redevelopment. So if you were having that during the jurisdiction conversations, maybe there's a place for us to have those conversations that doesn't really take that last question into account as the start.
So, sorry, I was also signaling somebody else. So, first of all, it's greatly appreciated you're here because you now see, people say massive development and it's an entity, okay? And quite honestly, it's an evil entity as far as we're all concerned because it has no face. But you sitting here and talking to us, okay, puts a human face on mass development. And though we may have some disagreements as to how we're going forward, at least now you're bringing it back to let's have a conversation. Because unfortunately your email, the email that was sent on behalf of you did not cover this. So I know you keep saying 3 years, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
We've got about 10 and a half years before that 2033 date, okay? Each town, we need to be able to sit down and say, okay, we need to be able to have all these decisions made, or at least thought out, not necessarily decisions made, but at least thought out as far as who's mowing the lawn, how many people do we gotta hire to mow the lawns, okay? He brought up a good point as far as these, houses and everything. When Devon's got built up, Fort Devon's, the government, I guarantee, okay, was not thinking like, okay, you cannot build that house right there because that house has got the bedroom in Harvard, the bathroom in Shirley, and the living room in Ayer. They were just plotting a house, okay? So we need, for example, the appropriate GIS map that Ed Starzik was working on, and then COVID hit and we never got it, so we would really like that completed because it also gives us good pictures to what's federal land and whatnot. But then we can start visualizing what is, because when it comes down to it, the property may go back to its original homeowners, okay? The property may get divvied up in different ways, but if I've got, my bathroom is in Shirley, I'm gonna ask Shirley, hey Shirley, can you give me that part, can we move your territory line over so I can have that bathroom,
a living
okay?
room and
But that's part of what we need to do, okay? But we need to look at everything. We can't just snap our fingers and say, oh, we got it back. And this town does like to have a plan. So that's why we kind of need you back. So we have, I know you're busy, okay? But it would be
this is important to me, so.
This would be greatly appreciated if you could attend the next Devon's Jurisdictional Framework Committee meeting. So maybe we can have a little better discussion and come up with a better plan. And Dennis, I almost forgot you. So we have a gentleman that, if you could stand and state your name and everything for
Is it
the
okay for me to turn
crowd.
around? I don't want to give you my
Please.
back. I apologize.
Hi, my name is Dennis Carter. I live on Pleasant Street in Ayer, and I'm here because as part of the building committee for the new senior center, what's been brought to my attention in spades is that there's a lack of land, open space, but there's also a lack of developable land within the town of Ayer. And we're looking for like an acre and a half, maybe 2 acres, 2¼ acres. Finding that amount of available land to build on within the town of Ayer is somewhere close to impossible. So I know that attempts have been made to reach out to Mass Development, and one of my colleagues on the committee seems to have gotten some traction recently. But there needs to be follow through on that potential, not because we're trying to co-opt the process, but there literally isn't that kind of space available in land, and there may be, not necessarily so, but there may be, properly sized lots within the historical boundaries of Ayer, currently on Devon's, that might be at least allow us to take a long, hard look at that. So that's kind of the first big ask from my perspective, being on the building committee. Beyond that, I think it's important, and I was involved in some of the discussions, and this is going back 10, 15 years, regarding the final disposition of Devon's and how that might play out in terms of the towns. I think it's important for Mass Development to be cognizant of is there are no fundamentally long-term decisions that you can make without coming to us for permission. That is, it's important to realize that we, the town, collectively, will live with these decisions for the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Long time after Mass Development has ceased to kind of be at all involved. So zoning changes, commercial industrial building, the presence of housing or not, how much open space, how much conservation land, how much recreational space is available for future generations who live in this town. That will all happen in the next 10 or 15 years, because we're not going to get another bite at this apple. Right? The land is pretty much all used up, because Ayer only has, 9.5 square miles. It's one of the smaller towns. So I would ask that you be aware that these things will have profound implications for the towns, and I'm speaking for Ayer, but I'm sure the same holds true for Hardin and Shirley. Have your decision-making process revolve around what is the ultimate goal in terms of the people who are going to end up living here.
Well, I appreciate that. Can I
Thank you.
answer him or talk to you?
Yeah.
So two things that I'd say is, one is we're excited about those conversations about the senior center, and I think that for us, I think that's something that they've always done even before I got here, is figure out a way to utilize the redevelopment process to support the communities and things they might need. I know we're talking about maybe some access to water from one of the communities that doesn't currently have it, and so in any way that we can figure out a way that the redevelopment process supports the redevelopment of the communities, we're going to do. I would say the Council on Aging, the museum, things like that that people are waiting to do, that we would prioritize and ensure that we do those things. I'm trying to not make us this faceless organization that doesn't feel or understand exactly what you are all going to, and having these types of interactions will help us with that. So Maggie Deloria is going to be talking with folks in there about that. And I know that's as much about that I know about it, because it's in the early stages, but we're excited. I think we're excited to help in that happen. I don't take it lightly, and the organization doesn't take it lightly, that these things will be here long after we're all gone. And so that's why it's important for us that your conversations are happening and you guys are telling us what it is that you're going to want to do long term. And I will commit to, and I think I did this when we spoke at the Harvard meeting. I'm going to turn around.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. You're
It's
probably looking at more people who
that I was a municipal leader, and so everything that we do is public documents, and so that's how I operate. And so any piece of information that you all need in these conversations, we will absolutely guarantee to put that stuff out to you. It's a standard that we should live by, regardless of what the question is. Our public documents, all the things we do should be, open to that public document. We avail ourselves of the executive session rights because sometimes we deal in real estate and not everybody wants to know what things are happening out before the deals are closed. So I will continue to commit to whatever data we have. John Macariel, who's our engineer, he's the guy keeping count of a lot of the stuff and making sure all the boundaries are being honored. And then the other thing I would say is, in this conversation about where it will be, we want to be a good partner in a way that when you guys have come to a conclusion, we were informative and not driving. I want us to not have a dog in the fight, and I'm afraid that folks believe that we may have a dog in the fight.
You're absolutely right. They do. They feel that you want control, that mass development wants absolute control. You're at some point going to take over the whole state, but that's going to be a little bit slower. I think I can tell you personally that in my years sitting here and having met some of your predecessors, this is the best conversation that I think we've had.
I think people have ideas about it. I take everything that happened prior to me as a learning piece. They try to make it a town.
Don't do it.
They try to make it a town. We heard loud and clear, I believe. We try to do housing 2 different ways. We heard loud and clear. There has to be other ways. I thought the prudent thing to do so folks did not believe that we were continuing having these conversations about housing is to stop talking about housing. Not because we don't want to do it. That's hardly hard. But we would hate for one of the towns to say, hey, you guys talking to Win? You guys talking to this developer, this other developer? When we have that discussion, we should have that discussion together. Hey, what do y'all think? I think the senator's op-ed about what type of housing goes where, I think that was really instructive. That's the senator's opinion of it. I would like to see what the town meetings are talking about. Because I don't want to go before you all with things that make you feel, again, you're not listening. And so we're continue to do that piece of it. I want to make sure I answered all those things right that he had brought up. But we do take that very seriously.
So the next Devon's Jurisdiction Framework Committee, way too painful of a name, is on October 12th. It's a Wednesday at 3 p.m. We'll send you the Zoom link. Perhaps you can join us or a representative. And I would, if you're able to, I would like the discussion, and I'll send the note to the chair as being, how and where do we go from here?
Yeah.
As far as, because we'd like to have mass development be a part of the conversation again. But maybe we can do it in a better way than what was being done before. I also have a thought that maybe some of our representatives from some of our committees, affordable housing and CPC and all those committees and everything, somehow start having an interaction more than perhaps what they're having now with mass development, a representative.
Yeah.
Keeping those lines, my point being is let's keep these lines of communication open better than what they have been. Because I think we're reaching a more critical phase going forward and things that need to be done, and we've felt shut out over the past few months especially, and I don't think we want that.
No, and I don't want you to feel that way, and I have a personal stake in keeping my former municipal experience in my heart, and so I don't want you to ever feel that way, and we don't. We have a role to play. I'm very clear about that. I'm an honest person. We're try to not steer from that. And so if we can do that in conversations, in support of the conversation you're having with the jurisdiction committee, but also in just general conversations with your planning board, with your housing committee, with your finance committee, I'm interested in doing those things.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions?
No other questions?
Mr. Rivera, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure to meet you.
And I'll come back anytime you guys want me to come back.
Yes.
If I can,
Yes.
juggle it, make sure I can come back.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe we'll set up something like I don't know, quarterly or annually or biannually or something. We'll figure out something. And definitely, but you're definitely invited back. And if you have something you want to say, just give us a call and we'll put you on the agenda.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for your time. Take care.
Okay. All right. Chief Gill.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm just gonna kind of go into my my presentation tonight, and I don't know really where we're gonna end up as to what we actually need to do. So I'm just gonna get right at it and go. So several years ago, Detective Barheit, Detective Kolarski, and myself kind of brought on a program called Bring Me Home. It was kind of something that we had designed and developed, and it was geared towards assisting bringing home people that tend to wander. So they have some sort of cognitive challenge or some sort of issue that affects their ability to get home safely. So it was something that we've advertised for several years. We've had families on that have taken part in the program, and it was really a fail-safe kind of a message program that if somebody had gone missing, we already had all that information up front. So we had a photo, we had their likes, their dislikes, in places that they would tend to gravitate to. So that would help us in trying to find them if they had gone and wandered and gone missing. And thankfully, we hadn't had to use that program that much, though we've had people register with us just in case. Recently, we've had the opportunity to talk to one of our residents here in town, who and he's in the audience here with us today, Mr. Matt Murphy. In the back here. He was initially inquiring about the program and what the services that we could offer, and he explained that he has some family members that do have some cognitive challenges that he would be interested in this program. And in this conversation that Detective Barheit was having with Mr. Murphy, he talked about this program called Project Lifesaver, and if we would be interested in pursuing a program such as that. We really weren't familiar with it, so they started a conversation, and we started to learn about it and the things that it could do for members of the town of Ayer that their family could tend to wander, and how that would help us. So we looked at it as with most things, and we tried to find out its financial viability. It was something that we haven't planned for, and it does have a startup cost that would be challenging in something that we hadn't planned for. Mr. Murphy had talked to us and said he has the unique capabilities to be a fundraiser, and he is that.
Yeah, I'm a
professional fundraiser. So not only unique, that's what he does. So he said that he is confident that he would be able to raise all of our startup costs for this measure. Not really familiar with fundraising on behalf of the town. I started a conversation with Mr. Pompriand and our town accountant to find out the viability of this, and that it is a possibility and that it's not unheard of for fundraising on behalf of a town entity to fund a specific project. So what I'm here tonight to do, I think, is to just get the blessing of the board to move forward, because the fundraising would be done on behalf of the town, in essence, and that money ultimately would be donated back to the town for that specific project. Just a little bit about what Project Lifesaver is. Project Lifesaver, it's an international program. And if you kind of see on the board, we have a map up there, and it shows a couple of towns that are already member towns, but our particular area is void of registered programs there. And I pulled this number off their website. This is how many individuals had been rescued using this program, and this was just as of a couple days ago. It's updated every day. Every time they have a recorded rescue, it gets updated. So the program has merits. The program works, and so basically what it is, a family would approach the Air Police Department and say that they have a loved one that has a tendency to wander, that they're concerned for their safety, and they would like to get them into this program. They would have a bracelet that would be an RF transmitter or an ankle bracelet, and we would have equipment at the station that could be deployed. And you would just kind of try to find the strongest signal and just kind of move that way, rather than kind of guess and just kind of go out every which way. We would really focus our abilities. One of the things that I found super interesting in researching this myself was that they have an average rescue time frame of a half hour.
Wow.
Which is when you're talking about trying to find somebody that could be walking towards danger, that's huge. That's real huge.
That's really good.
So that's what I'm here tonight to do, is to I think get the blessing of the board. I don't know if there's any votes that need to be taken. I leave that to the board, but I really just want to get the blessing and the support of the board moving forward on this.
I think it sounds awesome. I can't imagine a motion being needed, but yeah.
Not
Madam
children.
Chair, I think, just to echo what Chief Gill said through the chair, we wanted the board to be aware of the program, number one. Number two, we greatly appreciate Mr. Murphy and his expertise and willingness to do the fundraising. As the chief mentioned, he had a conversation with Mr. Aponte, the finance manager, as did I, and Fred can set up the appropriate accounting. We'll work out those details, but we also wanted the board to be aware of that, as with your blessing, if the fundraising effort begins, those funds would obviously come to the town of Ayer specifically and only for the Project Lifesaver. So
Okay. So do you need an actual motion, or just us to say?
I think it would be helpful if the board took an official vote to
Okay.
support it, because when we start the fundraising efforts, often people ask, is this legitimate and so forth, which it obviously is, but
Okay.
it would be helpful with your support.
Okay. Dennis?
It sounds like a wonderful program, and in our neighborhood, I live downtown, there have been a couple of occasions where a police officer has driven by and they are in fact looking for somebody who has won. So it's great that there's been that, kind of presence downtown looking for the people who are missing. More broadly speaking, in terms of government involvement, one question I would have is the civil liberties involved with, has this person consented to be tracked? And to
Well,
what
I think
extent-
that would be, I mean, I understand your question, but I think like that would be, with the family,
No, right.
Right.
But I think that the family communicating that properly to the individual who would be tracked, and that the police feeling comfortable that yes, it's okay for us to be tracking this individual, that would all be great. What I would just say is that in situations where there may be some cognitive impairment, there may be familial relationships which are somewhat contentious perhaps, or there may be, polite disagreements, how that is navigated between the police department and the family requesting the assistance and the subject of the search, it's just something I think bears some level of understanding.
So I think, yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
speak as a parent of 2 children with cognitive disabilities? My child's civil liberties takes kind of a backseat from not worrying that my kid's gonna run into traffic or end up in a swimming pool. which is occasionally, in a large majority of the cases, when kids wander off like this, is where they end up. And then we have a more tragic situation. So my 5-year-old civil liberties takes a real backseat to me, knowing that if he gets out of the house, and trust me, we live in a fortress. Everything's alarmed. We take every measure possible to make sure if he gets out, we know about it. But if they slip out, his civil liberties take a backseat to be minimally safe. So.
Sure, and I understand that, and you, as the parent of a 5-year-old, are their legal guardian, and you would be in a position to make that choice for them in terms of they will be, in fact, enrolled in this. For folks who are of a certain age, I just think it's something that, you know, it bears some, and again, I don't know exactly where that line is, but I think it bears some level of understanding if we are in fact to deploy town resources to track down someone who, in all likelihood, probably wants to be tracked, has agreed to be tracked, and is relieved when they are found.
Well, based on the information that was in the packet, it does look like, you know, it's the families who are getting this ID, this, you know, bracelet or ankle bracelet or anything, and then working with the thing. But I get what you're saying, and I think it's important for the conversation. So I would think that would already be worked out.
I think that one of the things that we'd learned during our onboarding with the training is that there would be some, some familiar disclosures, like, that these tracking devices aren't activated unless the family, wants them activated. And I think that's, not everybody in the town's getting issued one of these. It's families that are coming to us saying we have concerns with our family member that has a tendency to wander because they have a cognitive challenge, and
It's
that
like
they're
this
concerned.
Alzheimer's or something like that.
Exactly. Yep. And I'm sure, just with any missing persons that we have, it's an official report. It's not something that it's just, hey, can you go find my kid? He hasn't come home yet. It's, like I wonder about, mine when they're out driving, whatever. It's, somebody with a cognitive challenge that their family's already made the predetermination that they're concerned for their safety should they get out and wander outside of their control. So.
And this is already in Massachusetts, just not in this area like you were showing on the.
Correct.
thing.
Yeah, there are other, as you saw, those are just the dots in that kind of quadrant of agencies already using them.
So the cost is the $16,000 that you put in the memo approximately?
Correct.
From the time that funding is received, how long would it take the program to get ramped up?
From what I can tell of everything that I have been able to research is that they're very motivated to get this system online. The people that are with Project Lifesaver International are all about just bringing people back that are in a danger. So it would be our intent that as soon as it comes in, we start making these inroads with Project Lifesaver to coordinate the training and coordinate the equipment onboarding.
Thank you.
Have you had a chance to speak with any of your colleagues in some of these towns that do have it?
Haven't had an opportunity to do that. I'm actually at a Chiefs conference this week in Massachusetts, and I'm looking for some of these communities. The days are quite busy, so trying to mix and mingle amongst 350 other chiefs and find them is proving challenging. But I do know that they're from the testimonials that they do have that are on their website, that they're referred to as the gold standard in this field.
Any other questions?
No other questions, thank you.
I think it's a benefit. I get the conversation that Dennis brought up, but I think too that it's the families that are having, the ones that are probably legal guardians.
That's probably the biggest,
My father has been gone for a long time, but he had Alzheimer's, and a couple times he started wandering, so this would have been quite beneficial. So I think this is just another tool for some families to have that may need it. So I think that this is a good idea. And I encourage you to look more into it with the other towns and everything, to find out what they say, because you can also learn best practices. So,
From reading, from the other things that I was reading, is they want to create this net that, so an area, has these abilities. So you're not having to go to Boston, so to say, and pull from their resources. To have, a local resource, available, closer.
okay. All right.
I will make a motion that the select board support the Ayer Police Department implementation of the Lifesaver program.
Second it?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to bringing this to town.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. Chief Johnson.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Do you want me to put your thing up now? Your
Please, yeah.
presentation?
Yeah, you can just, yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I threw you into the board just to frame this and threw you then to the fire chief. As the board is aware, recently there were a lot of discussions and questions and so forth that had come up regarding the issues of mutual aid and so forth. There was some discussion at town meeting and what have you. And based on the instruction of this board, I did ask the fire chief and the deputy chief to prepare a public presentation on mutual aid. So this evening, they have a brief presentation to start that discussion. There is a lot of information. There are a lot of variables. There's a lot of numbers. So we figured we'd start, or the chief would start with a basic overview and get into some of the major issues. And then, in the interest of time and so forth, there may, at the future, need to be a part two or further discussion, I think is a fair way to put it, as there's a lot here. But through you, Madam Chair, Chief Johnson and Deputy Januszkiewicz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can give I know you had a written explanation on it. We have a short PowerPoint presentation that consolidates it, so we'll
Go
do that
right
and
to
answer
it.
any
Yep.
questions that we can. Great. So as you see there before, it's just so everybody knows, at least for the public people watching, that's just a diagram of our organizational chart of the fire department. As you see, at the top it'd be myself and the deputy, followed by the officer manager, and then how the groups are broken down. 4 groups that work 24 hours a day, followed by the fire prevention, and then our call department, the combination company. And you can see off the chain of command off the call department down there in the lower right. And then exactly what is mutual aid? Mutual aid is an agreement between fire departments to help each other across jurisdictional borders. Some of the things, as we know, we've been doing that for decades. The emergency, and the reasons we would do that, the emergency exceeds our local resources. So we have 2 fire engines, a ladder, a rescue that go to a structural fire. We can always handle a larger fire. We ask our mutual aid partners, which are our surrounding towns, to do that. And occasionally it could be just for manpower. We may only have the duty crew and a couple people that come back, and we need more manpower than that, so we would call more people in. There's also the second bullet point, there's pre-planned agreements. Such as like in the north part of Shirley off of Route 2A, we would go automatically if they get a reported fire in that area, just because we have a real quick run, and we would probably arrive before them. And the last one is we get activated, and we have a slide on this further down on the statewide fire mobilization plan. So that's 3 ways we can get activated. And this is what it's a industry standard. You would have what they call a 10-alarm run card. What that does is if we get a call for a fire, you'll see that one in red. So you'll see the 2 Ayer engines. We also have mutual aid started right away from Devon's and Shirley if we get a reported fire in a building. And then as each alarm works up, it can be anywhere from 3 to 7 additional units that are called. And then over in the notes section, you'll see if you need the special call, if you need more than 2 ladder trucks, let's say, that's listed. there on the side where we can get those ladder trucks from. And this is posted both over in the regional dispatch center at the police department and at our watch room at the fire department.
It's also in our regional dispatch center. So we only take till about the 4th alarm for our dispatchers, and then we turn that over then to our district in Westford, would then start calling mutual aid because our dispatchers would be focused on the incident.
And this just is an overview of what the towns that surround us have for full-time staff. So you see on the left where the towns are all listed, and then the number of full-time staff, and that's 24 hours around the clock. A couple notes: the towns that are highlighted in red actually have paramedic staffing, and Harvard has only a daytime person, I believe now. That's why we listed them as 0, but they do have somebody during the day. And then the last note would be Lunenburg. They're in the process now. They're at the intermediate level, so they're between basic and paramedic. They're looking to get to the paramedic level maybe by the end of the calendar year. And this is that statewide fire mobilization plan I talked about. The state is broken up into districts. We're in that purple District 6 you see up at the top of the map here. So what this does is this is activated only through MEMA. We've been activated over, say, the last 20 plus years to towns and cities like Worcester, Amesbury, Springfield, Spencer, Haverhill. Most recently, just this past summer to Saugus, when they had those large brush fires in the DCR property. And then a couple weeks ago to Ashby, they had a large outdoor fire that they needed help with too. So and this isn't something we do too often. When we're mobilized, it's a group of fire trucks that are mobilized at a rendezvous point, and then you're sent on your way. Like I said, I think the furthest we've been to is when the tornadoes happened out in Springfield. We went out there for a 12-hour operational period, then made our way back.
And the idea of this plan is that if we have a longer event and we're going to be using 8 or 9 alarms, we don't want to continue just to draw from our area. So they jump a district away and then draw resources from that away. So at least we then have something else if there's another call or a fire that comes in. I think we listed in the memo that I think the only time I can remember that we activated for the response to Ayer was when we had that brush fire up off a long hill, probably
2010. Yeah, because you saturated the resources at the beginning of that fire, and that was a week-long operational period. So those resources came from, say, down the Hopkinton, Milford Way, then they reach out west, and that's all dictated by MEMA, because they don't saturate resources out of another district either. And then some of the statutory requirements when we talk about mutual aid. As the fire goes on your left, Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4J. This is the mutual aid law. If the board may remember, you folks accepted it again last year. So the fire marshal sent out a memo asking if any city or towns had not adopted it to please look into that. So I reached out to the retired chief because I could not find any documentation of that. And then I reached out to Madam Clerk, who could not find a recording of it. So I came back to you folks just to get that accepted once again. And the important part about that is, if we go mutual aid, all the this affords the same rights, powers, and duties. So if we're not near, those same rights and privileges are afforded us when we're mutual aid by accepting that chapter. So I think that's a very important part, that we did accept that chapter. So now we know it's officially recorded. So we know that that's done, and that'll be good for its duration unless we opt out of it. The one on the right, we operate our ambulance service under the Office of OEMS, is what it's called, Office of Emergency Medical Services. Under our licensing agreements, we operate under certain Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations. And under the mutual aid part is the 105 chapter, and that where the agreement is that we shall not refuse care of any emergency dispatch of an EMS vehicle to provide emergency response, assessment, or treatment within the service's regular operating area. In short, when we have a license, we have to submit a service plan, and part of that service plan is those communities similar to what that map was that we service. And those are the ones generally who call on us for that. So those are the two statutory requirements, both for fire and EMS. this gets back to some of the issues on the staffing side. We certainly always have an increase of call numbers. As we talked about here, and everybody understands, housing isn't cheap, so more of the firefighters that we're hiring now, back say 20, 30 years ago, pretty much everybody we hired was from town. That is not the case anymore. And then we have a less availability of our call members. And certainly the training is a big part of that. There's certain training requirements that put a big demand on their time that they're able to give to that. So they have less time due to volunteer for training, whether it's fire or EMS. And certainly, like many of us, they have family commitments, and they're not able to come back for training or the calls. And certainly one of the things we find out too is we have calls in the middle of the night that be 1, 2, 3 hour duration. Well, they still have to get up and take care of their day jobs the next morning, so they're unable to do that. This is just a quick look at our call volume for 2021. So these are the fire incidents. We had 771 events. You'll see them listed on the left of the mutual aids that were requested. We had 5 events we did, which required 17 units. So the numbers are, we had a total mutual aid of 27 on the right, which is where we went, and those are the towns listed and how many times we went to them. So we went 27 times, but we required 17 units to incidents that belonged in Ayer.
Yeah, so when you look between the two, that's just the way our NPERS reporting is done. It does it by event. So when you're looking at the Ayer numbers, that's the 5. Well, that totals us actually asking 17 communities to come to Ayer, over those 5 events. Versus that 27, that is a singular Ayer unit going to those communities one at a time. So we have a drawn out plan where we notify the district every morning what our availability is, and we're one engine, one ladder. You pick. And that's what that line on the right is. So where it says Devon's 3, we didn't have all 3 pieces at Devon's at once. That engine went 3 separate times.
And there are times we do have to say no. It could be we already have an engine somewhere else. Both ambulances could be out. So there is periods we just don't have enough manpower, or the trucks are already gone to different other locations. I'm gonna do that one.
So this is the call volume for the EMS side for 2021. So our data reflects 1,593 patient contacts. So what you see is the call type below. So the 477, it looks like all the way to the left, is labeled emergency. Those are predominantly Ayer calls. And then you'll see the next one over is ALS intercept. So that's when we go meet in a mutual aid community en route to the hospital, or if we meet them at the scene to provide the ALS level for a BLS staffed ambulance of our neighbor. The 911 BLS is a BLS call in town. The ALS 911 is a ALS call that is in town. The reason you see it in the 4 like that is prior to 2021, we only used to track it as emergency. Our software defaults to that, and that was the previous chief always just left it as emergency. It was either emergency or transfer. And in 2021, somewhere around February, March, we broke it down to, hey, we want to actually see how many ALS, BLS, and intercepts we do. So going forward, I can give you more direct numbers year to year. But for this year, it's inclusive of the emergency line, the BLS, and the ALS is the Ayer calls, and then that ALS intercept is your mutual aid going out to intercept with the truck. And then the other 2 smaller ones are mutual aid. We're the transport agency. We'll actually go to the home, pick up the patient to complete the transport. And then the piece to the right is the hospitals. It's where we end up. So predominantly we end up in Neshoba. About 1,000 of those runs. We went to the medical center here in town, which for us is great because it's a quick turnaround. We can get our staff back in service, our truck back in service. The nulls can be a variety of things. They can be canceled en route. They can be refusals by the patient. We might triage them. We might or transfer them to another agency. So that's that 474, and then every other hospital. So the Emerson and the Lemisters are kind of a patient choice. We're all within 15 miles is what the Commonwealth uses. You can pick and choose if it's your doctor. For every other one going to the right, where it's the smaller numbers, those are all the specialty centers that we have to go to by protocol. If we pick you up with a stroke, and we call into the hospital and it's graded a certain way, we might have to take you to UMass. Traumas go to, a trauma center. So for us, it's Leahy, UMass. STEMIs for us can go to Lowell, they can go to Boston, we can meet a helicopter, whatever it is. But those are all typically specialty centers, and that's all dictated by the protocol. So we were just trying to tie this into how do we end up with the 4. Certainly it was, we recognize that we are busier than we were when we began the staffing at the 3 per 24-hour shift. That began in the town of Ayer in 1998 when I was hired. We went from two around the clock to 3. It stayed that way until we hired these last 4 in February. So we've been looking at the SAFER grant for quite a while, and at the end here we'll show you a video of what started piquing our interest about it. Our fires have changed, they've become faster. We recognize that our call department was becoming less reliable as far as numbers. The guys are very dedicated and the girls are very dedicated, it's just they're not always around. And it's something that we can't control. So we started looking at through negotiations with the town, as back then I would have been the union president, and the chief and I would talk about it a lot about how do we get to the added staffing. So we looked at the SAFER grant and we brought it to the town somewhere around probably our 2018 contract, and came to the agreement that, hey, we'll start looking for grant funding to try to ease us into what that cost is. So it's going to do a few things for us. It helps us with an adequate number of staffing to provide a safe environment for our people to work. There's been plenty of studies through both the NFPA and NIST that show that a 4-person engine company is much more effective and efficient than a 3, and that's what we are operating. And the thing we were running into, and that drove part of our grant narrative, was that 3 was reduced to 1 when that ambulance was out. And we had a few instances where we sent an engine company to a multiple alarm fire with a single person on it. So part of that grant narrative highlighted those events, and then part of it highlighted events like what happened on Fitchburg Road when we had the ABS explosion. We happened to have the 3 on duty and a call firefighter that was still in the building. We could show what could be done with a 4-person engine company in that same time frame. So we're trying to meet, as a department, the 1710 standard, which is 4 people on the apparatus. It's a 4-minute response to your house from the time of the call. That's probably about as far as we'll be able to go. Our department is too small. So we can meet 1710 for that first engine. That's what we wrote the grant to achieve. And then the department then follows 1720 for the remainder of our operations. What the SAFER grant does is a 3-year program to match salaries. Began in February, and so we'll get 3 more years out of it before the town has to take over that cost. But like I said, it was an effort, essentially to improve our safety and efficiency.
And some of the next steps, we always look at our ambulance rates and what we get paid to transport. I myself, I talk with the town manager. I've done that the last 2 years I've been here. And a couple noteworthy points. So if we look at the town of Ayer, 69% of our transports are Medicare patients. So that is dictated by a certain rate set by Medicare. So for instance, you'll see the top, it's an ALS 1 rate. So that could mean they could maybe do a monitor, an IV. It's just a rate, but it compares the two. So say for instance, I go in the ambulance and I'm an ALS rate. I'm not 31% person that would get charged, the 1205. And there's other ancillary fees, as the billing company would call them, that get added on, but these are just base rates. So if you look at that, I would get charged that, but the 69%, we only get the 498, so it's substantially less, and that's 69% of our transports. We are going to look at our advanced life support intercept rates, which are a flat rate of 275, and they've been that way since 2009. But it's just important, we look at those ambulance rates every year, and we also participate in a program we have for the last 3 or 4 years. Chief Pedrazi started it, and it was probably an additional offset to Medicare rates. We had about 30-something thousand when we started, and this past year we got an additional $62,000. So it's a program we participate in. It just takes a little bit of from the town accountant and us to put some stuff in, and additional reimbursement through Medicare. So as you can see, almost 70% of us are always dictated by the Medicare rate. We have no control over that. When we do ALS intercepts, it's a general, like it's all taken care of by the on-duty personnel, unless we end up having 2 ambulances out at the same time. Then we may need station coverage depending on the time of day and the day of the week. As always, we continue to support paramedic programs. As the deputy would say, he schedules. We have a lot of paramedic student ride-alongs. I think it's like there's a place down towards the South Shore. We do Mount Wachusett. So we're always bringing those students on, and what that does, it gets more paramedics into the program, so there's more people out there looking for paramedic jobs. As we know, coming out of the pandemic, that there was a shortage of paramedics, and that continues to be that way. We also can look at the evaluation of a fly car, which is a non-transport vehicle. That could be anything from a Ford Explorer to a Tahoe, and that just takes the paramedic equipment, puts it in the back, and the paramedics in the front seat, and you don't have to race around with what could be almost a $400,000 ambulance now.
There's still a significant cost to that, and that's kind of what's
we've
avoided.
Still,
There's the equipment just to equip us at the ALS level is in the $40,000 neighborhood, and what up until this point, what we were finding was we were doing a lot more transports. We'd show up, and the neighboring community would not be able to supply that basic ambulance for whatever. They didn't have around-the-clock staff yet. So we were running into that a lot. So it just didn't make sense for us to even pursue that until now. We have 24-hour EMS coverage on most of your communities around you.
And the last one, what we found is monitor the availability of private ambulance service for inter-facility transfers. So what we're finding of late, we're not licensed to transfer from facility to facility. What we're finding is the ER from the hospital will call down. They have a STEMI patient that needs to get a lull, because they need to get a stent put in right away, and they don't have an ambulance for 4 hours. So myself or the deputy get a call from the captain and say, hey, can we do this? And of course, all about saving lives. So we do it. We run the lull, and that's what we do. We save lives, So it's important. We don't do a lot, maybe one a month, maybe. It might not be the lull. It could be the UMass for it could be the weather. They might not, MedStar might not have anybody around, but we don't do it that often. And occasionally they'll end up flying the person out. So that does happen. It's just because there's no private ambulance.
We're their last resort for sure.
Yeah.
We have a pretty good relationship with our medical control physician. He's out in Neshoba, and his doctors are pretty on board with, call there last. If we needs to move somebody and they have to go now, they'll call and explain it. And the idea of, if it's a STEMI, well, time is cardiac muscle, so they want them out the door. And so we try to facilitate that for them, but they understand we're not licensed for that, we're not able to bill for that. He covers us under his license essentially when we're doing that transport. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it's something that the state's been warning us about. For most of COVID, they put a waiver in place that you didn't need the training because there's not enough private ambulances to complete all the transfers. They're not producing enough paramedics right now out of these schools because of that 2-year shutdown to fill all the jobs. I hear about it all the time from our competing agencies that are trying to hire paramedics. Like, how do you remain staffed? And our paramedics come and stay. And so it's something, certainly it's great for the department to have that, but it's the outlook is a little frightening going, we may struggle just like everybody else in the future trying to get paramedics, so it's good while it lasts.
Yeah, and we're coming out of the pandemic. We're still feeling the residual effects of a pandemic out of that. There's a bunch of mental health issues, substance abuse, and none of those are going away. We're probably coming off on our busiest year ever as an EMS provider through the fire department, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. And that's not just Ayer. That's it was probably busy, all the towns around us also would probably give you that same numbers. So I don't see those numbers going down by any stretch. And the last thing we want to leave you with, and we can answer questions while that plays, as the deputy alluded to on the video.
So what this will show you is takes us back to about when the conversation started with us about wanting to increase staffing. I don't think that's planned.
Should I start
Yeah,
it
go ahead.
now?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
start it.
I was waiting.
So this is about 2014. This is a test done by UL. So the room on the left will be, you know, what they call legacy furnishings. The room on the right is what you would find in most homes today. And all it's showing is the change in fire growth. You know, the way we teach firefighting and fire growth has changed dramatically in the last, 10 years. The heat release rate of furnishings today are dramatically faster. So that they've placed a candle in both of these rooms up against the backside of these couches. And this is, it takes about 3 minutes to demonstrate pretty effectively what the difference is in how this works. So this coincided with another set of tests they did. UL and NIST and the FD&Y did it. They burned rows of homes on, I believe it was Governor's Island, and they set them all up the same way, testing, how many firefighters did it take to do a set number of fire-around activities, and what percentage of efficiency did you gain or lose by adding personnel. So that's what started our progress to wanting to ask for the 4. So you can already see, the fire on the left begins to flame earlier. You don't see much smoke. It burns fairly clean, plenty of oxygen. Where the fire on the left is producing, products of combustion but no flame until just about there. Certainly the products on the left seem to be, fairly clean. You don't see them. So there's a question. There's no sound to this, so I always wondered at what point would the smoke detectors go off. Right, so if, my home is a 1970s, so I have the one smoke detector in the center hallway. Smoke's got to travel fairly far. If you're in a newer home, it's in every bedroom and then every hallway. So there's a question of, where is your alerting taking place? I would venture to guess that somewhere around now you have potential to set a smoke detector off on the right. The left still looks pretty clean to me. And then what we educate our people and educate the kids when we do Safe for the School is, fire doubles in size about every minute. So it takes very little for this fire on the right to go from what you see now to full involvement. We're at the 2-minute mark. Presumably you're calling 911. Well, what we're wanting to achieve is a 4-minute response time. So it's not from when that fire started, it's from when you dialed the phone. So if your smoke detectors went off in 1:30, presumably we're in the truck on the way just now. And we got about a 4-minute window now, potentially depending on where you live in town. And what you'll see in fire growth is the products of combustion come rolling out of that room on the right. That's, to us, is all fuel now. That will eventually get hot enough to burn and spread that fire rapidly. And that's what was concerning to us, as far as showing up with 1 or 2 personnel and wanting to push it to 4 to be able to make a faster fire attack. So as you reach the 3-minute mark here pretty quickly, you'll see that room on the right be fully involved and you're still barely burning anything on that couch. And that's just, it's for the level of foams, blues, how tight that home is now. There's a lot of issues, where we used to be able to have a ratio in our head of about, I got a window of about 30 minutes to get to your house and put a fire out, and I can contain it to a room. Now it's about 4 minutes to flash over, from the time a fire starts. So this is fully involved here just about. You start to get rollover. That products of combustion we were talking about spraying through your home is now fuel. It's burning. And somewhere about that 340 mark, that room will reach flashover, which is when everything in that room reaches its ignition temperature automatically and will all burn. It's no longer survivable. So presumably if that was called in right away, we're just pulling up to your house. So that was what drove our want to try to up that staffing to a 4-person engine company. We wanted to be able to have that pump operator, have an officer to be able to do the 360, and have the 4 people we require to begin fire attack. So this will fast forward for a few more minutes. I think it takes, 40 minutes for that room on the left to finally reach the same state of growth.
Well, would it be happy to answer any questions you might have, or from the public? Would be happy to do that.
Yes. Madam Chair, through you, Chief and Deputy, thank you for the presentation. Chief, back on the next steps, I know just for the public's benefit, Chief Pedrazi had instituted that every twice a year, the fire chief, finance manager, and myself review the ambulance billing and the status of the ambulance accounts in terms of preparation for not only the budget but the enterprise fund. And in our discussions, if you could just, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking to come before the board in the near future with a recommendation to at least increase that advanced life support intercept rate. Is that correct? I mean, at the 275.
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've gotten the rates around. Certainly there's room to go up because, as we know, labor's gone up, fuel's gone up, supplies. So certainly I would like to try to get that done so we can start that most likely at the beginning of the next calendar year. So by January, we'd like to go back and present the board with our new fee schedule and get that out. How many requirements they have to do to get that out to the people that we have agreements with. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, as we've spoken with I have with the town manager about that. I've gathered a lot of intel on the rates. I think we're right where we should be, and 70%, almost 70% of it is based off of Medicare. And we wouldn't want to, from the conversations I've had with both other services that participate in that Medicare program and our billing company, we're not sure if we changed our rates, whether that would bother the return that we're getting from that. And I think that return is much better than any increase we would get, meaning the program that we participate in that gives us that extra Medicare funds. So we're not sure if we increased our ambulance rate, whether that would take something else away when we almost just have to continue that program and we would be guaranteed some kind of rebate.
So I guess the thing to point out is when you look at that ALS rate is billed to the patient if we're the transport agency. If we are the intercepting agency, that is billed to the community that called us for the resource. So the town pays that, not, I'm sure it is passed along then to the patient through their billing, but if they get the Medicare reimbursement, we still get our ALS intercept.
Yep.
Because we're providing that extra equipment.
Dennis had a question.
Yeah, I had originally...
Could you speak up a little,
Oh, I'm
Dennis?
sorry. Yeah, I had originally come tonight just because Mr. Rivera was going to be here, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the Devon's disposition, so I consider this kind of like a happy coincidence from my perspective. I'm glad that the presentation was made, and the numbers, as he's given you, are the same numbers that I collected shortly before town meeting in late May. So I don't quibble with those. But my perspective on that has not changed, and in fact, I've done a little bit more research, and it has worsened over the last 3, 4, 5 months. And the reason I say that is that Ayer, prior to the grant allocation, had 15 full-time firefighters, which is at the high end or at the highest end of any similarly sized town in the Commonwealth. There are approximately 36 towns in the Commonwealth with populations between 6,000 and 10,000, which is where Ayer falls. Now, again, you can look at 8,000, you can look at Shirley, which has 6, or Groton, which has just about 12. So you can expand your comparison, however you need to. But my point is that comparative analysis is necessary in order to arrive at a reasonable conclusion as to whether or not Ayer's provision of these services is appropriate for a town the size of Ayer. So just to be clear on the numbers, for the 24 months, and again, these are the numbers that the Deputy Chief provided, and they're the same ones that you saw there. Fire had 1,400 responses. They provided mutual aid 39 times. They received mutual aid 9 times. EMS, 2,992 responses, and they provided 1,059 mutual aids. So about a third of all mutual aid, all responses, was out of town. Right? A full third. And that's for 2018 through 2020. And again, the numbers are consistent. For 2021, the fire responses were 771, mutual aid 5 times, received and provided 27 times, EMS 991 EMS calls within Ayer, just about 600 mutual aid EMS calls outside of Ayer. All right? If you do the simple math, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, what you come out with is about for the town of Ayer, which is our concern, for the town of Ayer, there are on average, between 4 and 5 calls per day. Per 24 hours, the town of Ayer receives 4 or 5 calls per day, which is one every 5, maybe 5 hours or so, depending. And that's been consistent for 3 full years. So I think that those numbers are fairly accurate. So what we have is the town of Ayer, and again, for the surrounding communities, this is a wonderful thing, right? The town of Ayer has become the de facto go-to mutual aid provider to the other towns. One of the numbers I had asked for was how much ambulance mutual aid does the town of Ayer receive, right? We are going out 600 times a year, right? Once, maybe twice a day, right? How many times are other communities coming to Ayer to lend support to the citizens of Ayer because we lack the resources? That was the one number that seemed.
But isn't that the point? Isn't it the point that the town of Ayer doesn't actually, we have the resources and we have the members that we don't need the other communities?
Yeah,
and didn't we have to help the town of Shirley a couple of years ago because they actually didn't have anyone in their fire station?
We absolutely have to do that.
Right, so.
The problem is the other communities don't seem to, right? That is, the town of Ayer is responsible for the citizens in this town. What I would suggest is that the other towns need to bolster the availability. What the other towns have done, and I think it's as part of the business plan, is they have outsourced some portion of their ambulance service and fire response service to the town of Ayer. They have reduced their fixed costs by not over-employing or over-equipping their fire departments. So if you call them, they can't come because they don't have extra. If you call Ayer, of course we can come because we always have extra, right? And we're all, not only, and again, as long as we have that level of excess capacity, other towns will call and we will be obliged, and I support that, we will be obliged to respond. We have a legal obligation to respond. We have an ethical obligation to respond to that request. The problem is that the taxpayers in this town should not be subsidizing the emergency services for other towns. Now, when the ambulance service, the enterprise fund, and again, I'd just like to, well, I don't want to belabor the point. I think that first, I would just like to make a few asks. One is that the public safety budget be broken out so that the enterprise fund, the fire service, and the police are separately listed so that there's a clear understanding of where the money is going in terms of fire, police, and EMS. Because I think at some town meetings, that public safety budget gets kind of all pulled in together. I would reiterate my request that a third party be hired by the town because I don't expect you to take my word for this. And it is certainly the case that on the floor at town meeting, nobody is going to listen to Dennis or Mr. Curran and say, well, he doesn't think this is a good idea, maybe we shouldn't do it, right? You're going to have to hire somebody who can speak with authority about how is it that other towns of a similar size, perhaps a larger population, are able to keep their populations safe, right? Operating with far fewer people and somewhat less equipped, right? You do not want to increase your fixed costs for the provision of a highly variable level of service. You certainly don't want to go into debt to acquire additional equipment to provide because when the issue around the second pumper came up, I would have thought that a legitimate question is, why do you need a second pumper? Well, in case XYZ happens, it's good to have a second pumper available. Okay. How often have you had to request pumper assistance from outlying towns that would define the level of risk we face because we don't lack a pumper? Has that number been going up? Have we been receiving multiple requests that we can't answer within town and have had to reach outside town? And again, nobody's going to take my word for it, and I understand that. So what I would encourage you to do, and I'll end with this, what I would encourage you to do is hire a third party to investigate these matters closely, to look at the enterprise fund cost overruns, because we were promised when that enterprise fund was started that it would become self-sufficient, and in fact the definition of an enterprise fund is such that it is designed to become self-sufficient, and in 2019 it went over 67,000, 2020 86,000, 2021 209,000, and 2022 63,000. So again, I don't expect you to take my word for it. The level of analysis needed to bring our department not in line with equivalent departments of a similar population, which is what ought to be done.
So I think you've brought up some good points. Scott wants to talk. I think you brought up some good points, but I think that we can't tell the other towns how to run their towns, because if we could, I think they'd all be run a lot better. So, Scott.
Thank you. So my first question was going to be on the fire call incidents, the 27 outgoing, that's just for fire. That doesn't include the ambulance, correct?
Single engine.
And I think the ambulance is really the crux of the question here. To Mr. Curran's point, if we have a range of dates that we're looking at calls, and a third of those calls are going outside of our community, we're footing the bill for an advanced life system ambulance. We currently have 2. That, I think, from my perspective, when Mr. Carr and I first had these conversations, that's what I was interested in, was really to look at what is the outlying cost that the taxpayers are putting out there. If we're investing $500,000 in advanced life support ambulance that's being used a third of the time at another town, what are we getting financially in return for that, to make sure that we are getting our money's worth and we're not being taken advantage of. And I also think from conversations with the town manager around Springtown meeting, we were kind of talking about this, is putting together hard numbers would almost give us the ability to perhaps go to the state and say, look, we are a regional ALS unit, and we should get regional funding to offset the cost, so it is not just the Ayer taxpayers that are footing the bill for the equipment and for all of that staffing. And from my perspective, on the couple of the other points, like on the staffing the 4 members, I fully support that. I know that that's been, Chief Pedrazi had talked about that for years. But to Mr. Carn's point, I think the focus needs to be on the ambulance side of things, to make sure that we are not supplementing that service. And it's an important service, and if we are, then maybe we look at other funding sources from the state that has less of a local impact and more of a regional impact.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
A couple points for Mr. Curran. I know the town supported starting an ALS service back in 2004. We started off at an intermediate level and slowly built up to like the 2000s, like in the it was 2 or 3 years after we peaked at the paramedic level. For those surrounding towns, we were like a backup. We weren't local. Like MedStar was out of Neshoba, which was great. They kind of did the bulk of the ALS. Come to say 16, 17, they started to kind of disappear, and we started having to fill the gaps along with, say, Littleton and Westford. What's that?
In town.
In town, yeah. So it's not something we signed up for. The town of Ayer residents chose to want ALS service. It's something that we're statutorily required to do, so to fill the gaps. And this isn't just a Ayer thing. This is like a statewide thing. I mean, I know our partners in Fitchburg and Lumsden, there's never enough paramedics around, never. And what's the problem? There's no paramedics to hire, and they leave the job fairly quick. And the EMS system is just overwhelmed with sick people, you know? So it's a broken system, but we don't have the answer to that. And I think of Ayer, you can go back to the 1900s. You could say we're carrying everyone else in the back. Well, we had the first full-time staff back in the 40s and 50s, you know? Then in 76 it went to 2, in the 90s we went to 3. So we've always been the leader, and I looked at it, that's what residents always supported and wanted, you know, as in that. And that's what we continue to do with the townspeople and the Board of Selectmen backing us on the SAFER grant.
I mean, again, I understand. My main concern about this is that a comparative analysis ought to be done. Similar sized communities with similar sized populations ought to, in a rational world, have similarly sized emergency services, the availability of ambulances, and fire staffing. Right? The town of Ayer should not have twice as many full-time. Now, if that means the town of Groton needs twice more, or we need half as much, I mean, we can argue about that. The town of Ayer should not be supplying Groton with 345 ambulance calls a year, one a day. And
Well, again, there goes to, I understand what you're saying, but then again, it goes back to the ethical issue, the moral issue. So that's what those residents have to talk to their towns about. So, Robert?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I hear, as I did at town meeting, Mr. Curran's points, and I appreciate it. In the comparative analysis, though, I do want to offer, it would be great if we lived in a world where it was simple, apples to apples, black and white. And for example, if you go just by population, the town of Groton has about 13,000 people. The town of Ayer has 8,000. But they are not, you can't compare the two. Groton does not have freight rail, commuter rail. It doesn't have an industrial park. It doesn't have a hospital. It doesn't have the commercial and residential density that we have downtown. So I'm not opposed to doing comparative, but I think it's important that we understand that it's not just simply looking at numbers in the comparison, that there are fundamentally unique characteristics to every town.
And I agree with that. So
okay.
If you want to look at comparative commercial industrial, let's look at Devon's, right? Why is it that we are going to Devon's 145 times, I want to say, and presumably the town or the entity of Devon's would have a substantial, that is, we are sending out our fire and ambulances to all the surrounding towns in their time of need. I think we are obligated to do that.
And I think you brought up some good points, okay? But I think we're going to be beating a dead horse here. So I'm just going to add this, which I think I may have lost my thought. So, you know, go ahead.
So I just,
because it flew out my head.
you know, looking at the numbers, he's accurate in the respect that it is, yeah, it represents 1/3 of the number, right? So, because I ran this year so far, I was curious to see where we were on track. And that's about what it is. So like I explained earlier, I broke it down to just 3 categories. You know, so now I can clearly tell what is Ayer ALS, what is Ayer BLS, and what is mutual aid intercept, and then what is our actual mutual aid transports. And we're holding true to that format. That's about what it is. We're running about 900 calls in the town of Ayer right now for this year. ALS intercept wise, it's about 450. So you know, it's your third. The difference being though is when I run a medical in the town of Ayer, it takes me between 1 and 3 hours. When I run an ALS intercept, it's between 0 and 15 minutes typically. I mean, so we're gonna go build that community 375, 275 for that ALS intercept, depending on where we land. And I'm billing them to meet them en route, but you know, in the majority of the time, like I tried to demonstrate earlier, coming to Neshoba and getting immediately back in service and being available for the community that pays for us. Like, and the second part of that, is not every community in the Commonwealth can have paramedics. There's not enough of them, and there's not enough patients. The idea that we're going to have paramedics that are good at their jobs and can take care of you adequately if we're only doing 900 runs a year is not going to happen. You're going to have paramedics that have a lacking availability of skill and knowledge, and that's part of why you see, yes, it's a regional effort. I mean, that's what the mutual aid system is. But that's what we charge that fee for, is to try to recoup that 15, 20, 25, 40 minutes, depending on the call. You know, I tried to run that report. I haven't figured quite yet how to run that down to the minute. But I can tell you just from experience, there is a dramatic difference in length of call, and that's part of what it is.
Madam Chair, if I could end on one note on that number too. Those are definitely numbers where we go out, but a lot of times those are canceled en route, and those don't, it's just, you show that unit going out, so that could be 1 every 4 potentially, you know, where we don't even meet up with them.
But
I just like to, and I know I'd like to end it. So, regardless of the town, I think for me, this is a remarkable set of circumstances. Let me end with this. Ayer, right, has lower residential property values, lower per capita income, higher poverty rate, right? Much higher poverty rate than some of the surrounding towns. And yet this town is sending out their services to the other towns, while the other towns are in a more improved financial position to then spend their money on what?
So I'm going to end this conversation on this. Okay, first of all, it's been a great conversation. Second of all, I think that the one thing that this town has always done is that we believe in safety, regardless of where somebody lives. Okay, I think that Mr. Kern has brought up some good points. Please take that information and add it to whatever analysis you're going to be doing, and so that maybe you'll have more answers to his questions the next time you come forward and bring this conversation. Okay, so but I thank you very, very much. I think this was very informative. I think it was a wonderful discussion, and
Great. Thank you all.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to be right back. Okay. Dan, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
We might need a breather.
I need to move from there.
No, I think you can run it from there.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Dan.
I'll keep it brief. So I have 3 items on my agenda tonight, and the first one is the discontinuance of the bottled water rebate. So in July of 2021, the Select Board voted to offer bottled water rebates to the customers in sensitive groups for the PFAS 6. And we've started the Spec Pond plant, so now the water we're producing at both Spec and Grove for our whole system are PFAS free. So the DPW recommends the board vote to discontinue the bottled water rebate program, and that would be retroactive to our start date at Spec Pond of July 25th, 2022. That was when we officially were fully active moving forward.
Do you have any questions?
No questions?
Neither do I. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to discontinue the bottled water rebate retroactive to July 25th, 2022.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Item 2 is also water related. So the EPA has developed revisions to the lead and copper rule, the LCRR, lead and copper rule revisions in 2021, and they're requiring all public water supply systems to develop and submit lead service line inventories to Mass DEP, and there's also a planning component to that, planning to remove the lead service lines. So this is a lead service line in your water system. You have your water main running down the street, and then you have the service that goes to the house from that main to the house. So the town of Ayer owns the public side from the main to the property line, and then, or typically our curb stops there, and then the property owners own the rest. But our lead service line inventory actually is required to take into account the entire length of the service line, so even the homeowner's side. So we've hired a consultant, Kleinfelder, to assist us
with our kind of initial sweep of what do we have for records, how big of a lift is this going to be, and to also submit an SRF application for us, and that's kind of what the crux of this item I have is. So the Mass Clean Water Trust has a SRF program for developing the lead service line planning and removal, and it comes with 100% loan forgiveness, and it's on a first come first served basis. So they opened it up about a month ago, and as you apply, first ones in are going to get the money, and it's 100% loan forgiveness. So it's essentially the SRF can't give out grants, so they'll give out loans with 100% forgiveness. So it's essentially a grant. So to apply for this grant, one item we have to take care of is I'd recommend the board authorize Robert as the town manager to file the application for the SRF as a, what is the title? Authority to file form, so certified authority to file. And then the second component, I was talking to Robert today, as part of the grant application, there needs to be a local authorization match. So we've done this before with previous SRF projects, like for example, the stormwater asset management, it was called a grant, but it was through the SRF that I had. We appropriated funds, about $40,000 that were just toward that grant. So as part of this program, and speaking with Kleinfelder, who's looking through our initial records, they anticipate we'll need about $130,000 to do this lead service line inventory and replacement program. So speaking with Robert, there's a few options for us to fund that, and I think the real key is that this application is a first come to first served basis, so we really want to get this moving now. So I think we didn't recommend using UDAG funds for that. I don't know if you want to speak more to that, Robert, or...
Sure. So as a direct event, we met this afternoon. The two components, one, which is the board's authorization to apply, is the easier part. The second piece, as we looked at it in more detail, we need to demonstrate an appropriation of $130,000 for the application, to move forward, and it's on a first come, first served basis. So the thought was, where it is infrastructure related, if the board authorized up to $130,000 from UDAG for this, and in the motion, we're going to get the refund, we're going to get the $130,000 back from the SRF, that would replenish it.
Right.
Is sort of how we were looking at it.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't obviously have an appropriation in the FY23 budget, which we're in now for this. Also, with town, it's basically again a timing problem, because if town meeting was to authorize $130,000, there's a couple variables. One, that would assume that the certification of free cash would be available by October 24th, and that's unclear. Secondly, we'd have to wait till October 24th at a minimum to submit the application. So we, Dan and I, in looking at it, as far as to expedite it, if the board authorized up to $130,000 from UDAG for the lead service line application to be replenished by the SRF refund, that would make the fund whole, if you will, but allow us to move forward on that.
Correct.
Yes.
So just to clarify, sorry. Okay. So just to clarify, so we allocate the $130,000 for UDAG for immediate release so that the application can go in. When that money comes back, it is going to go into the general fund, but when we do the budgeting, it will be earmarked to go back towards the UDAG.
Correct.
Okay.
And
I
so,
just wanted to clarify.
and I appreciate that,
Everyone
Selectman
involved
Hood.
on that one.
And for the record, that's why the motion, which
Okay.
respectfully I think you'd be prepared, the motion should reflect that. So the replenishment would be coming at the annual town meeting in 2023, and specifically the replenishment will come from the general fund, specifically the SRF refund for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have your hand raised?
No.
Okay. All right, Any further questions?
No.
No other questions, thank you. I'll make a motion that the select board authorize the town manager to file the application for SRF funding.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
I'll also make a motion to authorize, for the select board to authorize the use of UDAG in an amount up to $130,000 for the SRF funding, which will be replenished once that funding is received in the spring.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye.
It was the
Okay.
Okay, ready for the last item?
Yes.
Okay, last one's pretty easy. Agreement for Peroni Park Playground Phase 1 demo. So at the board's previous meeting, the board awarded the contract to Brighter Horizons in the amount of $173,000. They've provided the required bonds, insurance, and the signed agreements, so I'm requesting the board vote to execute the agreement with Brighter Horizons for $173,000.
No questions.
Questions?
I'll make a motion, the board vote to execute the contract for the demolition of the playground and soil remediation project in the amount of $173,000 to Brighter Horizons,
Second.
With signature by the chair.
with signature by the chair,
Still second.
hopefully.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair says aye, so no
All right.
maybe.
Okay.
You just want to wait
Thanks,
one second.
Dan.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which
Thank
line
you,
am I
Dan.
signing on?
Under, where it says by under select board chair.
Okay.
And one more.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Okay, Robert.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. In the interest of time, I'll get right to it. You have the town warrants that were reviewed and approved since the board last met in your packet. And I will get right, unless there are any questions from the select board on any administrative matters, I'll go right to the action items.
I have no problem.
Okay?
Not here.
So the fall special town meeting update, as I put in the packet, the deadline for warrant articles is September 30th at 1 p.m. as set by this board. That's also the deadline, Friday, September 30th at 1 p.m. to the town clerk for any citizens petitions. As of today, there are currently 4 warrant articles. I put the brief summary in the packet. There are 2 community preservation funding CPC articles. The first one is for $400,000 for NOAA's affordable housing 40B project on Fitchburg Road. The CPC has gone through that application. They had the public hearing, and it was approved and recommended to come before you for inclusion on the warrant. The second CPC article has to do with funding for the historic restoration of the howitzer at Town Hall in the amount of $31,000 was the request of the application to come from historic funds. The CPC committee was receptive to the presentation we made and has scheduled the public hearing for that project for September 28th at 7:30 p.m. And we're cautiously optimistic that that will move forward. So those are each an article, Article 1 and Article 2. The other 2 articles are street acceptances. The street acceptance of Woodland Way and Hemlock Drive from Woodland Way to its end. That's part of Pingree Hill Phase 4 as public ways. And a street acceptance of portions of the Riley Jane Farm as public ways. On the Pingree Hill Phase 4, the planning board has conducted its hearing and recommends that. On next Tuesday, they are meeting on the Riley Jane Farm, and we anticipate, with their approval, that will move forward. So those are the 4 articles as of today for the town meeting. Again, the warrant is still open. The deadline is Friday, September 30th at 1 p.m. After that date passes, the select board is scheduled at your October 4th meeting to review and approve the warrant. Upon your approval, that warrant will be posted officially by October 7th, which is Friday, October 7th, at which time it will also be sent to printing and mailing to all of the households. And of course, the town meeting will take place on Monday, October 24th at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of the Ayer Shirley High School. The next item that I have, unless there are any questions on the warrant at this point, number 3, the FY24 budget and proposed budget calendar, and you have in your packet the last several cycles. This has worked well to have a definitive schedule for the budget process with the major dates, and of course any change of a deadline or a date is subject to review and approval by the select board, so it keeps us on that process. So you have in your packet the draft that the executive buy board has been reviewing and discussing. Thanks to Ms. Antonellis for putting this together. It's a different format. We've used the calendar format in the past, and there's been some challenges with that. This is more of a list format, as you can see, which each month with each box with the major dates that are proposed. We're not looking for your definitive approval tonight, but respectfully, by the October 4th meeting, the next meeting, if the board could approve this so it's in place, and generally that's the first meeting in October that the board has approved it, we would appreciate that. I don't know if there's any initial questions.
Yes, could you tell me what time the rate review committee meeting is going to be on October 11th?
So the rate review and
does this every year too.
The rate review, the rate review, the buy board, and what's the third one? There's a third one that we have these are just placeholders, so you and I need to connect.
Oh, okay.
Capital. So the capital, in terms of the actual capital meetings, rate review meetings, and the executive buy board meetings, we will get those inserted for the 4th. So that was just a placeholder. Good catch.
Okay.
And please look again at any of the other dates. One of the things the Selectman Hood is aware of being on the buy board, we're still discussing and would look for your input as far as the public presentation of the budget. Again, everything is a work in progress. There seems to be consensus that there should obviously, and there will be, an initial public presentation of the budget as we've done in the past. Selectman Hood has brought up an idea that we're in the process of putting together a better tracking system that would show the changes to the budget as it moves through the process, specifically for the public, whether it's color-coded and so forth. And we're still just having some discussions, again, subject to this board, as to the subsequent public hearings to the budget. So that's an area we're working on. The second area that remains a challenge to be solved is we still have a compression in time. It's sort of like the roller coaster towards the end of the process leading up to town meeting. So again, if there are any initial questions for tonight.
Well, you have the tax classification hearing for November 15th.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that, but historically, we've done it in the first meeting of December. That's the way we've been doing it for like a decade.
Agreed. And the new finance manager and the new assessor, from their experiences elsewhere, say that's pretty late to do it. So that's why they'd like to move it up.
So we've been doing it that way for a decade, and it hasn't been a problem. But now we're saying it's
No,
like
there's no problem. It's
Well,
just
I
later.
just yeah.
Than usual.
Okay, because that's the way this town has done it. That's all I'm asking. So okay.
So again, that I would put in the placeholder category as subject to confirmation there. So in the interest of time, I won't go through the whole thing. It's in the packet, but I think what would be helpful is if on the 4th we'll get those meetings I mentioned nailed down, and I'll talk to the specific chairs of those committees, capital and so forth. And then on the 4th, we can do a review and looking towards approval. The last item that I have in the packet, number 4, is an approval of a CPC letter for the application for the howitzer. As the board is aware, the CPC committee is often looking for letters of support for applications and projects, and respectfully requesting that the board consider a letter of support. What is in your packet is a proposed of that letter. Of course, it's the board's prerogative if you want to change any aspects of that, but we'd be looking for your support and signature for a letter of support to the CPC committee. We also, just so the board's aware, we have letters of support for the project from the Ayer Historic Commission, the Fort Devens Museum, I think the American Legion. Alan has done a good job in getting support, so we would be honored to have your support for the application as well.
I have no problems with the letter.
And John?
Make a motion that the board vote to approve the letter of support to the Town of Ayer Community Preservation Committee to fund the restoration and preservation of the 1943 historic Ayer howitzer at Ayer Town Hall.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair says aye.
And Madam Chair, unless there are any questions from members of the board, that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, any new business or questions?
None for me?
No.
Okay, meeting minutes from August 16th, 2022. I didn't see any issues.
I don't know.
Wait, that's wrong.
What?
What's wrong?
Hold on. I
It
think
wasn't
we
August
did.
16th?
No, so it was, sorry, September 7th.
Yep.
That was the typo.
Oh,
I was like, I know we
Oh.
wrote those already. So it is September
what day is
7th.
today? Oh yeah, the 20th.
And
Of
these were
September.
the September 7th ones were the ones in the packet.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, I didn't have any problems with the September 7th one, too.
Sorry.
Jeez. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I make a motion. The board vote to approve the meeting minutes from Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. Or,
Yeah, it says
it's
2002.
2002.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll switch
so-
that.
Okay.
Those need
From
to, so as
Wednesday,
amended.
September 7th, 2022, as amended.
Got it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye.
We can still sign this page and it won't affect the 2022.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Good night, everyone.
Good night.